CNT125 Design Lab. We ran short in the last podcast, so I just kind of paused there. I'm going through the resources that are here on D12 for you, and I just opened the helpful information file. So let me go back to the Design Lab right here. If I go back to the Design Lab page, this is where the on-campus lab is. Here's the lab itself. Here's the podcast we're going through right now, a link for diagrams.net. Podcast reminding you how to do a diagram from 120. And then we're on the helpful information file right here. So as I open this is basically a summary of a whole bunch of config we've done throughout the semester. And I remind you here about these would be the wise things to do before you get to the lab. Here's the wise things to do during your lab time, okay, on how to implement your design so you're being the most efficient with your time. Here is reminders about private addressing. Here's reminders about how you stack the VLANs for IP phone config, switchport access VLAN 10, switchport voice VLAN 20 kind of thing. Okay. Here's remote access reminders, enable, telnet, SSH config, console config, etc. Reminders on config on DHCP. Down here's reminders on NAT config. Remember, it's two pieces. Indicate your interfaces, and then you actually do the NAT command. Here's helpful information for access lists, and I remind you about the whole build it in Notepad and paste it in. Here's your syntax. And that way, if something goes wrong, you can delete it out of the router, edit it in your Notepad, and repaste it in. Much easier to deal with than trying to delete individual lines in the router. That does not work so well. Here's other information on access lists on your port numbers that are helpful. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And a link to the Wikipedia page on port numbers. Okay. Coming down here is some voice over IP config. The general stuff we do. Here's the general config, the max phones. You probably want to do max E phones 15, max DN 15, because you have 15 phones that you're planning for now. Down here is how we do the DNs. Here's how we do the E phones and put them together with the button command. Down here then is some troubleshooting. Some things you want to do for troubleshooting your network. So I try to put some troubleshooting tips down here as well for you to help you through. Okay, and I remind you, make sure you're using the newly acquired knowledge from the troubleshooting lab to try to help troubleshoot your own network design. Okay, so this is here to help you. This is really kind of the helpful part for step 2 of your design. The first is make the map. Step 2 is implement. So keep all of these handy for implementing your design. Let me go back out here. And what we're going to find also, in addition to those, I have some helpful links here on private addressing and port numbers. Here's the Dropbox for your lab. And then in here, I have a packet tracer file. Feel free to download this. When you do, you're going to get this. This will allow you to test your design at home before you get to the lab room. You do need to hook it up in the lab room and demo its functionality, okay? But this will allow you to run through it at home and test your design before you even get to the lab room. That way you can work out maybe some subnets that aren't working right, or oops, I have some IP address conflicts that aren't working right, okay? So if you open this and look, off to the right I created a little ISP for you, a router, switch, and I created a DNS server at 888 because that's what you'll be configuring your network. And I made a little fake web page here for google.com. The idea being, if you can open google.com in this scenario here, it should work in the lab room. That's already cabled up. Here is, we're using the 2011 router because we need them for IP phone. So we're using the 2011 router. Here it is that you can cable up to your switch. Here's your 2 phones. Here's a workstation. Here's your second PC at your table that you're going to plug into a wireless port. And then over here is the extra, if you have time, adding in the Wi-Fi access point and laptop. You can plug this in and test your network there as well. So I have some reminders here about the names, enable password class, console password Cisco, SSH, Bilbo Shire, Telnet, Bilbo Shire, etc. Okay, I tried to put a bunch of these tidbit reminders in here from the lab. Feel free to hook this up and test it out, make it work. Now, a couple tips. Remember with the phones, same thing here. You're not going to plug them in until you get everything configured, and you would actually drag this up here and plug it in to power it up just like you would in the lab room. Secondly, the MAC address on these guys, if you hold your pointer over, if you look, it looks like there's 3 MAC addresses, which there is. You're going to grab the MAC address that's listed there next to VLAN 1. Oh, let me hold it again. Let me hold my pointer over there again. You'll see it's 0002.16a3.3d9e. That would be the MAC address you use for this phone. And the one next to it, the MAC address you would use is, again, the top line, 0007.ec5b.6c00. That would be the MAC address you use on that one. Okay, and then cable them in. And again, remember, make sure when you're cabling these guys, okay, we'll go port 1 here. Make sure going from the phone to the switch, it goes into the switch port. Make sure it is the switch port there. Okay, make sure that is correct. Alright, so feel free to, after you make your network map, because we're going to do that the first day we start the lab, the design lab online, I'm going to talk you through what to do and get your map together. You could then take some time Tuesday and plug your design, plug your map into this packet tracer file and try to work out any kind of like things that aren't labeled right or something like that on your network to make sure you have it all. Feel free to do this to test it out. When we get to the lab room then, this is where you will then work through and hook up and make it work. So in the lab room, we're going to cable up, configure your switch, configure your router, configure your phones, plug them in, etc., and then get everything functioning. Add in the access list here for the wireless users. Here's the bonus one you can add if you have time. Test your network, and again, you can add the access point if you have time. Okay, this is something you do after. If you have an hour left, you can add this in. And then I remind you about demoing. Make sure you're showing me your network functioning. Make sure you show me your network functioning. And then these are the pieces you're submitting: router config, switch config, and your network map. And it's a digital copy of your network map that you drew on something like diagrams.net, not putting numbers on my map and taking a picture of it. Okay, that is not you making your network map. And then here's your cleanup commands. And again, you might need to run these before. As you sit out your router and switch in the lab room, you might want to double check there's no config. If there is, run these commands and do a reload. After you do the restart, do erase start, do the reload. After you do this here, erase start, do a reload, and that'll reboot it to come around and be a clean router and switch for you. Here's all the things we're checking off. So make sure all these things are done on your map. Make sure all these things are done on your switch. Make sure all these things are done on your router, etc. And then down here, this is the pieces. These are the points I'm awarding you when I see your network functioning. I will check these off. Yes, I saw it work. Yes, I saw we were able to browse. Yes, I saw it work. Yes, I was able to call each other, and so forth. Okay? And again, remember down here, this is a planning page. Feel free to use this. Here's a planning page. Feel free to sketch your ideas out here and then transfer this over to diagrams.net so you have your own digital map with your plan. And remember to bring that to the lab room with you. Okay. So going back to our design lab page, that should be it for the resources in here for your design lab. So think of this again as CNT120, you came up with a plan, you said, hey, this is my plan. Now in 125, you're going to take that a step further and make it work. You're going to implement it and make it work in the lab room. And really, this lab is just kind of a summary of all the major pieces of config you've done all semester, with the VLANs and VLAN trunk and the sub interfaces on the router, and doing the IP phone config, and then doing the NAT and DHCP config, and then adding in an access list. So we're just taking all those really big important pieces and putting them together into a real functioning network. That's all this lab is. It feels bigger than it is, but it's really just a culmination of all the important pieces we've done this semester. And spoiler alert, your lab final is going to look very similar. We're going to take out the IP phones. That adds too much time to our lab final. So take this network that you're building, take out the phones, and that's essentially going to be your lab final. So as you're doing this design lab, if you're really taking this seriously and really focusing on what you're doing and really trying to do all the steps that are needed, you are doing a massive review for the lab final. Okay, so just a little heads up on that for thinking the next couple weeks down the road here. So there is our design lab.